You have to fail to learn. And to learn that lesson properly, you can look at other people's failures, but sometimes you just have to do it yourself before you go, really screwed up there, never doing that again.
Hello and welcome to the meeting room. I'm Paul Harvey. Today we're talking about something that sits at the heart of everything we do in events, yet is often misunderstood: relationships. Joining me to explore that is someone who's spent a great deal of time thinking about leadership, trust, communication, and human connection. I'm delighted to welcome Shonali Devereaux, the Chief Executive of the Meetings Industry Association. Shonali, welcome back to the meeting room.
Thank you very much for having me back.
It's wonderful to see you. Now, relationships. There's so many different aspects to explore, but I wanted to start with networking.
Yes.
It's one of those words.
The dreaded network, the dreaded N word, networking.
Well, I mean, it immediately
yes,
causes a reaction, doesn't it?
Does.
Some people are like, but some people are like, yes, get me in there.
Absolutely a necessity in our industry, I think. Our industry is absolutely built on relationships. And often we, as events professionals, are put in many situations where networking is what we have to do. Ironically, we're always facilitating networking breaks and ways of doing it on behalf of our delegates and thinking, oh, they'll be all right, we'll stick in a networking break. But when we have to do it ourselves, it feels a bit different, doesn't it, somehow? Yeah.
Why do you think networking kind of feels uncomfortable for so many people?
I think networking as a word has become very taboo because it's associated with some kind of transactional meeting. And certainly if you are somebody representing a venue who is wanting to go into a room full of agents, or does that scenario exist, a room full of agents? Let's make it happen more often. If you want to go into a room where you have to solicit business, where you have to talk about your venue, where your idea is that your company has paid for your time to be at this event and they're expecting you to come away and report on what transactions have taken place, then you walk into this room not thinking about human-to-human connection, but you're walking into a room thinking about the transactions that you need to make, the things you need to achieve. And you walk into a room, often you won't know anybody, right? And I think you and I have talked about introversion before, and many people on this podcast will be very surprised to learn that I am absolutely an introvert. But I like people, right? I really, really like people. And that I think makes the difference, is that I'm always deeply curious. You'll find me in a room of networking having a very deep conversation, one-to-one with somebody. And I might have 3 of those deep conversations over the course of a networking event, but they're never facetious, they're never top line, they're never... And oh gosh, we hate small talk in Britain as well, don't we? Because we're never honest with small talk either. It's always, you always go, how are you? And your life could be in turmoil and you always go, oh yeah, I'm fine, thanks. So we never really get anywhere with small talk. And I think networking is scary to people because they think they have to show a return on investment in it. You walk into a room of people you don't know and you don't know where to start because we don't have little arrows on our heads saying, I'm a buyer, I'm a seller, I'm going to be useful to you in this conversation. And then what people do is they radiate towards people that they know. And then an hour later, they're like, oh God, now I've got to go into the office in 2 days' time and I haven't had any new conversations. The whole prospect's just terrifying.
But I suppose if you're thinking, what outcome can I get from this conversation, you're kind of approaching it in the wrong way, maybe?
Everything has to have a purpose, right? And I think if you just reframe your outcome, what relationships can I build in this room? Who can I meet human to human? Because I really think our industry is the foundation of our industry is relationships. If you ever need something or you need to fix something, it's built on that trust that you have between you and your supplier, between you and your client, and building those relationships is absolutely key. So if you walk into a room, it's really which humans can I get to know and not what can those humans do for me. And if that outcome is around the people, you end up having very unexpected and serendipitous moments and conversations. Those opportunities, we always talk about water cooler moments, those opportunities are always found in the conversations you didn't expect to have.
You touched on it there about why relationships still matter. Technology's changed, business models have changed, but people still buy from people,
People still
they?
buy from people.
Why do you think relationships remain such a powerful force in the meetings industry? Is it because of that?
There's so much that we don't talk about in terms of emotional emotional intelligence and trust, which, is really, really important in our world. You can have a transactional relationship with somebody, but if you're trying to navigate a complicated situation, you really need to have a relationship with that person so that you've built up some rapport and some trust, and you know that you can lean on that person in a time of difficulty, or you can call up that person if you need them. And it's that continued dependence that isn't just, it's not good enough to just have something that is transactional where I know that person. We're all fundamentally humans, and getting to know another human is what builds that point of trust. Being vulnerable with somebody else is what builds that point of trust. I think that trust is what underpins our industry, really, is that when you go into a situation, you can plan for every single scenario, but it's the unplanned scenarios and the moments that happen where that trust really matters.
Trust plays a pretty important role, doesn't it, in the industry, and especially in decision making, because there might be several, suppliers, venues or partners kind of capable of delivering a project, but often decisions come down to the confidence in the people involved.
Yeah, and we've moved, I guess, from networking to pitching as well. The nature of pitching has changed so much over the last 15 years. And what is really particularly hard for agents at the moment is this kind of diversion through the procurement department, where the procurement department really cares about, the bottom line in terms of money. And they're not getting to go face to face with the clients to build that emotional relationship and trust. Because, again, going back to serendipity and the moments in between, when you are planning for a pitch or delivering a pitch, it's really understanding the client. How do you do that? You build relationships with them. It's understanding about what they really want to achieve. You can see it on a piece of paper, but a conversation allows you to talk around that topic and figure out really what the purpose of the event is and how you might be able to deliver that. If you're the expert in your venue or you're the expert in your product, the only way you're going to get through to a client is by building a human relationship where you can have conversations around things rather than having relationships that exist through emails or paper.
It's not just external relationships as well, it's internal relationships within internal teams.
Correct. It's psychological safety within teams is so important. The difference between a high-performing event team who is simply logistical and a high-performing event team who excels is one in which that team knows that they have solid relationships with each other and they can rely on each other. There's a really strong sense of psychological safety and trust and openness and vulnerability, knowing each other's strengths, knowing each other's failures, knowing they can pick up work for each other when they need it, knowing what's going on in their lives and being able to pick up for them at that point. It's that reciprocity that's really needed in teams.
I wanted to talk a little bit about AI, because everyone wants to talk about AI at the moment. We're hearing a huge amount about it. I suppose there's understandable excitement about it because obviously it can improve productivity, automate tasks and support creativity as well. But do you think that AI actually makes human relationships more valuable rather than less?
AI can make many scenarios more valuable, right? AI can take out a lot of the surface level research and thinking that's needed that often takes a lot of time. I will use AI a lot to go, this is the framework of things that I need to address, and can you help me come up with really quick wins that help me move my thinking forward in this way, and it'll help me with that. And in that sense, you hear a lot about AI replacing a lot of human relationships that are happening at the moment. You hear about a lot of young people having relationships with AI because they reflect back on them essentially what they want to hear. When I started using ChatGPT, it made me terribly uncomfortable because I'm not ego-driven, and it kept saying to me, "You've done a great job, Shonali. Really like your thinking over there." And I actually had to say to my AI, "You have to stop telling me these things because you are a machine, and I know you're a machine. You're a processor, and I'm not dealing with this feedback. I don't ever want to think of you as a person who went, okay, Shonali, good suggestion. I'm not going to give you any more feedback." So it's like, I had to get that in there. So I think if you're not looking for AI to replace how you act as a human or replace how you interact with somebody, I think it can suggest and help you if you're feeling shy with a few opening lines you could try. But ultimately, what makes you human is your ability to own that, practice it, say it in the way that you feel comfortable, and then express that. So I don't think it's going to replace relationships for sure. And when you talk about business relationships, and I don't think it's going to replace personal relationships. But I do think it can help you trawl the information that's out there to understand a good philosophy or an approach or something that might make you feel more comfortable when navigating your own relationships. Fundamentally, a lot of us like to not feel alone, right? You look at how much information is out there on Reddit and, people posting a question, and saying, I'm having this issue in my life or with my dog or whatever it might be. Have you had this problem too? And as humans, we want to make those connections. If someone else is going through something you're going through, that's incredibly powerful. And empathy and authenticity are things I absolutely want to talk about today. But and I think AI is able to go, look, here's the wealth of information that's out there, and tell people they're not alone, and this is what we know about it. But it is up to you to build that relationship with the other person.
One of the things I find fascinating about kind of your kind of journey is your involvement with improvisation. Just for anyone who's hearing this for the first time, how did you end up taking improv classes?
It was a really interesting time in my life. I had been doing event logistics for a very long time and actually continued to do them after I took the improv classes. But it completely changed how I approached absolutely everything. And I was in a time in my life where I had broken up with my ex-husband and I had embarked upon a new relationship. I was living in a new place, and me and my new partner at the time, who is now my husband, we went to a bar, and there was a leaflet on the table that said improvisation classes Sunday night. And my first thought was, that sounds absolutely terrifying. And then my second thought was, well, why not? Let's give it a go. Because I loved Whose Line Is It Anyway? And I loved watching them just create magic on stage. And I don't know, it's just that wonderful moment of, I'm going to sink or swim. Let's just, if they're classes, they can't go that wrong. What could happen? I learned really early on that, and I've given a TEDx talk about this, and improv has rules. And those rules are that in any given situation, you trust that you have done the work. It doesn't mean you have to avoid doing the work, do the research, but trust that when you sit down to your podcast with Paul, that in your head, you know enough that you need to know in this given moment. Trust yourself that you bring enough to the table in any given moment. And then the second principle is that you have to trust others, right? You've got this other human across from you who today might have had all sorts of journeys. You very kindly asked about my journey, and I haven't asked about yours yet, but you've come to this place here now. I have to trust that what you're bringing to the table is we're trying to create something together, and we're going to do it across the table by trusting in each other. And then there's the principle of treating the other person like a genius. Everything that they give you is a gift. And then you build on that gift by saying yes and. That doesn't mean you agree with everything they say, but you say yes and in your mind before you build it into something else. And that leads to creativity. But the core of it, and where it relates to relationships as well, is actively listening. The thing that makes you a great journalist, the thing that makes you a good podcast interviewer, is that ability to actively listen to what's happening in the moment and ask the next question that seems obvious to everybody in the room. I do it as an MC. If I'm facilitating a panel, sure, we'll have a pre-panel chat, but then I will always forewarn people, you might bring up something so fascinating on stage that I will have to build on that, because the audience, in their brains, they're going, I really want them to ask more about that. And the minute you go back to your script, you're operating out of fear. Fear makes you want to look clever. And that active listening and being open to what's coming and being curious about it leads to more interesting innovations and conversations.
Conversations in business are often kind of the opposite of that, aren't they? Because people might be listening in order to respond rather than listening to understand. So improv has taught you about listening.
Absolutely. Listening, trusting everything that's brought to the table. So it changed the way I did logistics. So event managers fundamentally want to control as many of the millions of moving parts that there are in an event as possible. Manage spreadsheets and manage groups of people and love Gantt charts and, keep an eye on your budget and do all of the things that you're supposed to do in events. But all of that preparation beforehand, that 95% to make the 5% on the day, is as much preparation to mitigate against risk, to, ensure that all of the moments happen to the timings that they're supposed to happen, ensure that everybody knows that they're supposed to be. So the sense is that you have to be a person person in control. But ever since doing improv, it's almost like that lack of control and the build-up of trust, everything I've done since has been better than I personally could have imagined, because I've been able to take on the thoughts and ideas of other people, and they've been psychologically safe to bring their expertise, their fears to the table, all of us able to lean on each other, and it's just created much better projects.
So it's kind of counterintuitive in a way, isn't it? Kind of you're the leader, but kind of you've got to let go of some of that control to get better results.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I worked for the British Heart Foundation as their head of events, one of the loveliest things they did was they decided that they were going to change their leadership approach to one of a coaching-based leadership. So they had all of us trained in coaching-based leadership, and it was you learned how to coach essentially, and then I took those skills on and did a lot of life coaching and breakthrough coaching from there, because it's absolutely fascinating. You just have to actively listen to somebody and reflect back to them what they've said. And so, in one-to-ones, and this is terrifying in events, by the way, it's terrifying when you have, somebody who's entirely responsible for the London to Brighton bike ride, and you're having a one-to-one with them, and you literally have 45 minutes in a meeting, and it's 15 minutes of them, 15 minutes of what's happening in the organisation, 15 minutes of what's new. So you've got 15 minutes. If there is some massive crisis point, you want to go in as an event organizer and go, look, I've seen this happen before. Don't take this action because it's going to lead to this consequence. The truth is the world has changed, the circumstances are different, the stakeholders are different, whatever the scenarios is different. And so the question to ask is, what do you think you should do in this scenario? And then go with that, where do you foresee the problems with taking this particular action versus that particular action? And then ending it with, okay, so do you think this is the best course of action? What do you think is the best course of action to take? And you've co-created something there where somebody has complete ownership into the solution. You haven't gone, I think this is what you should do. You said to them, what do you think is best? And it encourages so much more ownership, accountability, responsibility, and ultimately people feeling that the organisation is a space they want to be because they're being allowed to be listened to and grow, and they can grow within that environment.
What about trusting yourself?
Trusting yourself is really important. I think I'm going to come back to that fear moment, right? The moments where I reflect on that I have done badly, I have brought more fear to the situation than self-trust. Where I've had to just literally give up control and go, at this moment, I know as much as I'm going to know in this scenario, and taking a really deep breath about it, because you can say that to yourself, but you don't necessarily believe it. Taking a really deep breath about it and walked into that scenario, it brings a different energy. The minute you operate on fear, your brain is laser focused on what could go wrong, laser focused on those things that your inner voice is telling you can't do. And you are looking out for those things. You're looking out for the danger, and it doesn't make you prepared for the opportunity. You've got to trust yourself. There's trusting yourself because you've done the work, and there's being blasé and not doing the work and not trusting yourself. And the latter is irresponsible, right? You would never come into a situation where you're just winging it. Every time I talk about improv, everybody associates it with winging it. It's really not. It's just being able to fully be immersed in what you're doing and make the best of that opportunity with what you have in the moment. And trust in yourself is essential.
The events industry can often be obsessed with getting everything right, and so mistakes can feel pretty visible and failure can feel pretty visible as well. But I suppose one of the lessons from improv is that failure isn't something to fear. Can we learn from that mindset?
I mean, there are a million learnings from that, Miles. I was thinking about just now when you asked me about self-trust, and I was thinking about that kind of fear versus knowing what you know in the moment. I was emceeing the B Corp annual conference, which is about 3,000 people in the room and then a further sort of 10,000 people watching on screen. And it had been going really well, and we got to day 2, and me and my co-host got on stage, the auto cue was in front of us, and we'd both forgotten the little clicky button to move it to the next thing. And I knew there was about 4 pages of text, right? I had thankfully read the script again and again and again. There's no way you can memorize 2 days worth of scripts. It's not happening. So I roughly knew where we had to get to. And the one thing I could remember was the first name of the person who was coming on next. So we did our first segue. We looked at each other in panic. On both of our faces, in that momentary split second, was, uh-oh, we've forgotten the clicker. I knew as a person with greater experience, I had to do the I've got this moment. And I knew her name and I said, please welcome to the stage, ta-da, whoever it was. And I'd obviously spent the entire weekend giving everybody a proper intro, so-and-so from this organisation, and using their last name. So it would have looked completely obvious to any MC, but to us, we moved the show along. Failure will happen in a million ways on stage. That's just one example. In a 30-year career, there is not going to be a single event that goes to plan, no matter how hard you plan. But it is your ability to understand your knowledge, act and react in the moment, and rely on your team to pick up for you. But that requires vulnerability. You have to be able to share with your team when you haven't had a break, when you need a moment, when you need the support. You have to have that kind of relationship with them. If you don't fail, you don't learn. One of the first events in my career, I was so client focused. Anything the client wanted, the client got, essentially. And it ended up becoming one of the lectures that I delivered in university, which was, is the client always right? Debate. And what I hope that the students bring out of it is that as event organisers, you are experts at event organising. And there will come a point where your client is not right and you have to push back, and you have to learn how to push back in a way that posits you as the expert, but then gets the best outcome for the event possible. My client wanted to reduce our breaks to 15 minutes each in a very, very busy schedule so she could get one more session in the day. But I was turning around 3 concurrent sessions in 3 different rooms where each session had an AV requirement. And you can guess what happened next. There was just not enough time to move people from room to room, for them to have a bathroom break, for them to get a cup of tea, for AV to turn it around. And every session was running late. And I was running around, like I was the sole event manager on the whole thing, running around trying to pick it up. Will I ever make a 15-minute break again? No, I will not. You have to fail to learn. And to learn that lesson properly, you can look at other people's failures, but sometimes you just have to do it yourself before you go, really screwed up there, never doing that again.
Let's talk about one of my favourite things about the events industry, serendipity.
Oh, I love that.
Some of the most valuable conversations that people have at events are the ones that they never planned to have. Can you build serendipity in? Can you design serendipity?
Yes, you can design opportunities for serendipity, right? Serendipity on a personal human-to-human level comes when you are fully immersed in the moment, actively listening and willing to be vulnerable about it. So that is human-to-human serendipity. However, we as event organisers design environments, we design programs, we design, down to the colour of the room or the shape of what you're doing, or the communications message you've left somebody with just before they go into a room, or you give them games to play with each other to be able to get to know each other. But all of those things, you can engineer circumstances around serendipity. It's like winding up a wind-up toy and letting it go. But that serendipitous moment has to come down to that human being open to answering to give rather than answering to respond.
When you think back over your own career, how often have opportunities come from unexpected conversations rather than carefully planned ones? Always.
The opportunities are all out there. It's whatever you as a human are focused on that will show the opportunities to arrive. And I guess this builds on your last point about serendipity. If you are laser focused on what you want, what the purpose of what you want is, this whole Simon Sinek thing, if you are focused on what you want, then your brain will be attuned to looking out for opportunities within that space. And the ask could be very simple. When I became a freelancer after working for the event organisation company, we had always worked on mega events. So my ask to the universe was, I really want to work on major events like the Olympics, the Paralympics, the Commonwealth Games. And it meant that the questions that I was putting out to my network and the people that I was connecting with were more and more in that sphere. So you could say that I was engineering my own serendipity, but then it was about taking the initiative to say, meet me for coffee. Don't know where this conversation is going to go. And I think my first Olympic job was entirely a serendipitous meeting. It was, I had a colleague that had gone out there, but I'd made it so abundantly clear that I wanted to be a part of this, that it was so ingrained in the conversations we'd had before she went out there. She was actively looking for opportunities to bring me across. She doesn't have a vested interest in my career. It's my career. Do you know what I mean? But then she was talking to people, and then they were talking to me from Australia, and then building those relationships. It then just happened.
There's a famous quote, isn't there, from a golfer? I can't remember who it was, but someone said that they were lucky, and he said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And it's that putting you, keep on doing the right things, and what you want to happen will happen.
Well, so this keep on practicing and the luckier I get is one of the first stages that Stephen Bartlett talks about in Diary of a CEO, is that mastery is the first step, right? There's knowing what you want, and then there's being a real master at it. I'm fresh out of and extremely tired from an Elvis competition this weekend. One of the Elvises there is absolutely focused on his mastery. He's learning all the instruments. He now plays the piano. He didn't a few years ago. The same with the guitar. He's absolutely laser focused on being the best entertainer he can be, and that mastery is opening up opportunities for him that are beyond the Elvis world. Yeah, mastery, first form of the more I practice, the more lucky I get.
What do you think the meetings industry gets wrong about relationships?
We have many opportunities to meet with each other. As an association, we facilitate many of those meetings. Many people do fam trips. We all have opportunities. We go to awards. We have opportunities to meet with each other. And we as an industry use those opportunities to relax. And I love that. But if we want to move ourselves forward, can we be more strategic as an industry about who and how we want to meet with? You know, I don't think we get anything wrong, but I don't think we apply the same business principles about the meetings that we organise to the opportunities we have when we meet with each other. We were together a couple of weeks ago at the Meeting Needs showcase. You know, I used it as an opportunity to connect a couple of beneficiaries in the room with a number of other partners, because I know that's not going to turn into anything on that night, but in a few weeks, months, whatever it is to come, if Meeting Needs goes, we're supporting this beneficiary, we want to raise for them, everybody who's met them in that room has already sold into that story. I didn't have to do that night. That was a night where I could have kicked back and gone, this is my board that I used to hang out with, and I really enjoy being with them and do that. And I did do that. But, you know, it's about giving. It's about making the most of opportunities that can pay off in the future. And I don't know that, I think we love each other's company so much, and our work is so hard, that we kick back instead of pushing forward.
Finally, if every listener could do one thing differently tomorrow to build stronger, more meaningful relationships, what would you encourage them to do?
I would encourage you to leave your ego at the door. Check it in with your coat. Because the minute you walk into a room and you look at somebody in the eye and you realise they're another human and they've had this other day, and you ask them about themselves and you really listen to what they're telling you and you respond to that, you've built a relationship that will last you an industry lifetime, a lifetime, may be something you take out of the industry. The minute you come into a room and you go, this is my agenda, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is my spiel, this is my elevator pitch, whatever it is, you shut off the part of your brain that allows you to really build a human-to-human connection.
Fantastic. Shonali, thank you so much for joining
me. Thank you.